Good morning or good afternoon. A very, very warm welcome to all of you here for this session on redesigning economic systems for a sustainable future. So first of all, let me welcome the distinguished guests on this stage. And to my left, there's Duc Phoc, the Deputy Prime Minister of Vietnam. Very warm welcome to you. We have Joël Clark, I hope I pronounced it correctly, the Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action, Constituency Empowerment of the Government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Also very welcome to you. We have Pamela Coke-Hamilton, who serves as the Executive Director of the International Trade Center. A very warm welcome, nice to have you here. And last but not least, Mavis Owusu-Gyamfi, who is the Executive Vice President of the African Center for Economic Transformation. Also, nice to have you here. What we want to tackle for the next hour, next 45 minutes, to briefly set the stage what we want to do, is to talk about how we need to redesign the global economic system in order to make it work for all countries, in particular for countries of the Global South, and also for all citizens, in particular of countries in the Global South. So these two dimensions. And if you look at the shape, the stage of the global economic systems today, we see increasing conflicts across countries about equal access to resources, to markets. We see also within countries increasing conflicts, and particular with this perspective of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, huge challenges. So what we want to tackle specifically is to ask, how should we redesign economic systems with three dimensions in mind? First of all, how can we make markets work better? How to give countries equal opportunity, equal access to markets, and to prevent market failures in particular. Second, how we have to redesign, reshape institutions. Markets, market economies, economic systems can only function as well as institutions do their job to ensure equal access, equal opportunity, a fair competition, a fair access to resources. And third, we want to ask how we can redistribute, so make the social dimension, inclusion within societies, more equitable. How we can create employment, jobs, opportunities, how we can better achieve the Sustainable Development Goals from the perspective of individuals. And here, there are many dimensions, in particular with regard to sustainability, protecting the natural environment. There are many dimensions of these economic systems which we want to talk about in the second round of the discussion. It has to do with trade, access to markets, in particular the question how countries in the Global South can get better access to markets in the Global North, how there can be fair competition, how to prevent protectionism from taking place. It has to do with industrial policies, how countries can develop new technologies, be innovative, have developed their own comparative advantage, what they're good at. Of course, it has to do with labor market policies, how to get people in jobs, in good jobs with perspectives and high standards. It has to do with social policies. Again, the equitable access is important. So you see there are many different dimensions to that discussion of reshaping the economic systems. And that's what we want to talk about. This a little bit to the framework. With that, I want to start a first round of discussions. So the idea is to have a first round where we have the big picture about the economic systems, and the second one to go really into detail about trade, about labor market policies, about social policies. And I want to start with you, Deputy Prime Minister. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And my first question to you is, what's your perspective on what should be the priorities on reshaping the global economic systems in the perspective from Vietnam and your country?
Ladies and gentlemen, according to the UN, the SDG, nearly 80% of the SDG targets risk falling short by 2030. Conflicts, violence, rising tensions, strategic competition, unconventional security threats, including climate change, are placing immense strain on the resources essential for our development. Super Typhoon Yagi struck with unprecedented devastation, and for Vietnam, 329 people are reported dead and missing, with the property damaged estimated to 2 billion. And storm Boris, Hurricane Ellen have also led to widespread destruction. Against this backdrop, we must significantly advance cooperation, leverage the scientific cooperation achievements, fostering innovative thinking, and through a global comprehensive approach, economies of both national and global need to transition to be greener, more sustainable and adaptable. Our development must harmonious, relying to nature, ensuring equity, and leaving no one behind. I'd like to propose 3 direct actions as follows. First, we need to enhance national resilience by restructuring economies, transforming growth models, and reforming economic management system towards sustainability. This includes fulfilling international commitments like digital transformation, green technology, human quality, human resources. Businesses should embrace green thinking, transform their models, and align our cooperation with green and circular economies. While maintaining social stability, governments must provide legal frameworks and facilitate new resources and opportunities for the people and the businesses. Secondly, we should foster solidarity and equitable and beneficial partnership, including public-private partnership. We should take decisive actions to engage closer cooperation at all levels and transition to a fair, sustainable, and prosperity society. Developed countries should actively support developing nations through technology transfer, technical assistance, capacity building, and resource support, including effectively addressing debt issues. Third, we must accelerate, restructure transformation of global governance, becoming more efficient, transparent, and equitable. This will include the support national economies in achieving sustainable development. International institutions like World Bank, IMF, and other partners should enable developing countries to access loans and aids for economic restructuring and channel resources to green projects, renewable energy, and environmental friendly industries. Ladies and gentlemen, every action we take today contributes to shape the future of all humanity. And I'm confident that this conference will add momentum and drive for all stakeholders together towards a sustainable future for everyone, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your remarks, Deputy Prime Minister. I would like to now make one round, and maybe we can move next to you, Pamela. And from your perspective at the International Trade Center, from the Global South, what is really needed in terms of maybe specifically on how can we build institutions, how can we improve institutions? We have the big discussion on the WTO and how it is an institution with little teeth or small teeth or no teeth at all, and how difficult it is to reform this institutional environment to get markets functioning better. But maybe that's just one perspective, but I'd like to move to you next.
Sure, thanks so much. I'd prefer not to speak on the WTO. It's a parent agency, so I might, get slapped. No, but seriously, my bigger issue is how do we recalibrate the terms of trade? One of the things that we're talking about here is, okay, how do you make a difference in really changing the trajectory of the international trading system? But you can't change the trajectory of the international trading system until you address the root causes of the problem. And I think part of the problem is that we keep dancing around the issue and pretending it doesn't exist. And we're very good at that. For me, the fundamentals have been the same for 400 years. That the terms of trade have remained the same. We have the extractives, we remove, we take to the metropole, we process and develop, and then we sell it back to the very same people we took it from. And I come from a sugar-producing country, now a rum-producing country, banana-producing country, etc. And virtually two-thirds of the world are commodity-dependent developing countries. Virtually all commodity-dependent developing countries are also LDCs. Does anybody ever ask why? You know, is there a commonality here? Because if we look at the reality of how international trade continues to be carried out, these systems are based upon a dynamic that continues to retain wealth in the North. And there is no value addition in the South, or very little. There is no ability to increase technology transfer. There is no ability to increase the skill sets that people need. If we take cobalt, for example, 75% of most of the cobalt in the world, as you know, is in one country. And that country has not in any real way benefited from that. Why? So for me, the fundamental issue is that we need to address the systemic issue. Once we're willing to address the systemic issue, then the rest can be added on. But we have to address the elephant in the room, which is that the terms of trade haven't fundamentally changed in 400 years. So that's just my take on it.
Maybe I can push you a little further on this. I think this is an important point, in particular, what you say with the dependence on commodities, right? And there is a term in economics, sorry, it's not derogatively meant, but it means Dutch disease.
Yes.
That oftentimes when countries are very dependent on commodities and you have a fluctuation in the price of the commodity, it has a huge impact on all of your economy. In particular, often the deindustrialization, because other companies that are not benefiting from, let's say, higher prices of the commodity, they often suffer because the exchange rate is appreciating and so on. So when you talk about the systemic problem, is it in your view mainly something in the countries themselves, or is it more something in the global economic system that needs to be addressed? I know, very hard question for 2 minutes.
But it has to be the global economic system, because it is the global economic system that determines the entire system. Let's take, for example, any of the oil-producing countries, developing countries, okay, or any commodity-producing developing country. The development of the commodities in those countries is driven from where? It's not driven from those countries, it's driven from northern companies and multinationals. Mm-hmm. In addition to which, you cannot have Dutch disease if you build factories, you employ people in that facility, you increase the skill sets that they have so that they're able to earn a decent living and have a livable wage. You look what happened. I'll give you one final example. Look at what happened when Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, who are 75% of the cocoa-producing countries in the world, decided that they were going to ensure that this living wage link would be enforced, and therefore they would not export the cocoa below a certain level of processing. And Mars tried to break it. Yeah? And eventually they had to fight for something as simple as trying to ensure a living wage for their farmers. So it's not a simple thing that countries just decide, oh, look, we're rich, we have lots of oil, and we're going to be corrupt, or we're going to have Dutch disease and it's going to be great. No, there's a system, as I said, that has been established across the world that continues to perpetuate this dynamic. And until we're willing to change that system, and I'm not saying that the South doesn't have faults, of course, but what I'm saying is that the system is designed in a way that perpetuates the dysfunction. So.
Maybe that's a great link to you, Mavis. You talked a bit, or one part was employment, right? How to ensure good employment, value added. And Mavis, the question to you is, from your perspective, maybe in particular focusing on the social, on the labor market dimension, how do you see the faults, the mistakes globally from the perspective of the Global South? What needs to be improved or changed fundamentally to give more equal access, generate better living conditions, more employment, and with that, more development?
Thank you very much, and thank you to the HSC for the invitation today. I'd really like to build on the point you made around terms of trade, but I'd like to flip it on the head a little bit. The world is changing. We have become even more interdependent than we used to. So the transition to green industrialization has become critical, not just for Africa, but for the world, which means that there are two paths ahead of us. Path number one is the world continues to insist in global terms that they want raw materials. And I think increasingly the countries with raw materials are going to say no. We are only willing to engage if there's value addition. So what happens in that world? We all lose out. Let's be honest. It's a lose-lose for everyone. So the question is, what is the win-win for everyone? At the African Center for Economic Transformation, we've been pushing a lot for something called growth with depth. And the depth stands for D for diversification, E for export competitiveness, P for productivity, T for effective use of technology, and H for human well-being. And I would like to answer the question by focusing on diversification, productivity, and human well-being. So if we start with diversification, green industrialization offers African countries a real opportunity to change the landscape, to shift from the current dependence on export of raw materials to a new trade agreement with the world where we are shipping value addition. So where Zambia is actually shipping products that have copper, is shipping copper rather than raw materials, where DRC is shipping EV batteries rather than the raw material. Now, if we can redesign our industrial policies so the value addition happens, so that we are actually engaging in a way that trades effectively with the rest of the world, that's the beginning of getting real jobs, decent jobs for our people. And linked to that is the element of regional integration. We talk a lot about regional integration. We started with the regional economic communities, and now we are the African Continental Free Trade Area. The onus is on us to say no. When Germany comes to Ghana and says, let's do direct business, to say no, to say we are working in this value chain, we have centers of excellence, we've built a value chain where we produce this, country, Zambia produces this element of the component, Nigeria produces this element of the component, we are value chain. So you can't come and offer us an investment in the whole value chain. If we can build these centers of excellence and we can build a value chain, we are more ready to compete with the world. Europe competes with the world not individually, but through solid value chains. Africa needs to do the same. But it also means that Africa has to say no when we are offered a grant to do everything in one country. We don't have the skills to do it. The onus is then on us to facilitate labor mobility. If I am a young student who is skilled in scientific research in Kenya and the Center of Excellence in Ghana, I need to be able to move to Ghana and do that job without any of those barriers. So our diversification really starts with us. But we need to stand strong and hold firm in that decision to diversify our new industries. And then productivity. And I'd like to build on the minister's point. Productivity comes to skills and it comes with technology. Okay, we can skill up to a certain point. Currently, we have a lot of the raw materials for green industrialization. The bulk of skills and technology sits in the global north. If this is truly a partnership, we need to gain access to those skills and technology. So building on what the minister says, this is where we look at productivity. Investment in infrastructure, partially governments, increasingly private sector, investment in technology, investment in skills. It has to be a shared agenda between the North and the South. And then finally, human well-being. We need policies that push fair wages. We can't let industry drive wage levels. Governments need to have a much stronger voice in driving fairer wages. We need policies that push gender equity. If I hear again a discourse that a woman is incapable, I will scream. We are capable. The systems are against us. Okay? So, let's stop discussing capability and let's start building fairer systems that enables us to fully take advantage of the opportunities in this industry. And finally, we must enforce inclusive labor market policies. And by this means that it's not just gender equity, it's about building systems that enable different abled people to be able to participate in these industries. To be honest, this is the only way in which we are going to create a fair global labor system. It starts from the industries we build and how those industries are built, and the policies that governments put in place to ensure those industries treat human beings like human beings and not just, providers of profit margins. And if we can get to that place, then we can start to see the ambition that we all are hoping for. Thank you.
You touched upon many important dimensions. I will push you in the next round a little bit on the institutional environment, because you made some very important points about regionalism versus multilateralism. And we know, particularly in the trade area, that multilateralism has not progressed very much over the last 20 years. But I first wanted to bring you in, Joyelle, and it's, again, many of the points the three previous speakers made apply to your countries. Diversification, Mavis talked about. In a small country like St. Kitts and Nevis, of course, is even more dependent than a big country with lots of people on diversification, open borders, and being integrated in a regional, global, but in particular in a regional economy. So my question to you is, what do you see as the most important priorities for making these economic systems in the area of trade, but maybe also in the area of sustainability, climate protection? Your country, of course, is affected, is exposed a lot more. So what do you see as the most important priorities?
Thank you for that question and for the opportunity to share this small island context. And I really like starting my interventions by referencing that St. Kitts and Nevis, we're just 52,000 people, and we're the smallest independent nation in the Western Hemisphere. And we've moved from our colonial past, sugar and agrarian economy, to a tourism-based economy, and now to a services and an investment economy. And it's still external. It's still driven by what happens in the global north. So for us, if we're going to survive, St. Kitts and Nevis, small islands, Caribbean SIDS globally, our survival is premised on collective action. The global north, the global south. Everyone working together to reframe sustainability around economic justice, around environmental justice, and also bringing numbers very down to the micro level that's making numbers connect with people and their livelihoods. If we don't redesign current economic systems, in particular as it relates to climate finance and providing countries with finance so that they can respond to the climate crises, then we're always going to have small island developing states in a perpetual state of crisis, responding to crisis, responding to economic crisis, responding to climate crisis, and never really attaining sustainable development. So for us, we have to address the geographic disparities in terms of access to finance. We have to ensure that we're including all voices in the conversation about economic sustainability. Young people, women, yes, we are capable. I mean, we are capable. Young people, women, the elderly, the differently abled, and of course, livelihoods that aren't deeply connected to the international system. For us, quarter of our economy is premised on the informal sector. And how do those persons survive in an economy and a global system that has absolutely no connection to how they make their livelihoods? So that's what I think has to come down to the nuts and bolts of survival in a small economy, the people.
Maybe if I may follow up on that, and Mavis talked a bit about social policies, Pamela also labor market policies. What does have to change in terms of institutional environment, global environment to make that happen? I mean, the huge informal sector you talked about, and also Mavis talked about many dimensions, gender equality. I mean, there are many groups, not minorities, majorities, that are either excluded or at least don't have the same opportunities. So where do you see the key failures in the economic systems that need to be addressed?
Right, so and from St. Kitts and Nevis, we are categorized as a high-income country, which means we don't access ODA. We cannot. That's unfair because you're looking at a number rather than the comprehensive look at what makes us vulnerable in terms of access and finance. And that's why we're happy that the UN system has adopted the multidimensional vulnerability index. It means countries like us have a fair chance at survival and accessing concessional finance. Additionally, if every time we need to develop and grow, stimulate growth in our economy, it comes in the form of debt, it means we'll never escape the crisis that we're in. So those are two fundamental changes that need to happen. Support outside of debt, and also looking at our comprehensive vulnerability profile rather than just a number.
Right. Thank you. This is a great transition to the second round, and I'd like to return to you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, too. And maybe all of you already take the headphones so that we have the translation. But the question to you, particularly on the financing side, and you mentioned that also in your opening statement, you talked about accessing to loans, restructuring of debt. We have many countries in the global south that with the pandemic and subsequently with this huge energy shock that we experienced, high inflation, got into serious difficulties on financing sovereign debt, but also corporate debt. And my question to you is, what concretely, and in the second round, we really want to talk about solutions. So what concretely do we need to change in the global economic system to improve that? And my question to you is, in the area of finance, what do you see as the need to do things, the reforms that are most urgent?
I think that the SDG needs the resource, a large resource, a finance resource, and to have this finance resource, we have to transition and restructure the financial system towards a fairer and transparent manner. And this is a global perspective, so countries with high incomes, developed countries, have the responsibility to help in terms of capital, technology, and human resources for developing countries, so that we have like ODA grants and highest technology, so that we can develop the green economy and sustainable energy economy. And we need a fine legal framework for this as well. And we need the help from the developed countries to help us to energy transition, high technology, information technology, data, AI, and digital transformation. So those are decisive factors. And we need to reduce the emission to 2050 to net zero emission. And we have to transit to green economy. And it requires high-skilled workers and also experiences, financial resource, and high technologies for us to transit to this economy. Currently, we have been committed to COP26 that we have achieved net zero until in 2050. And we have been determined to transit to green economy and energy transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy like gas, wind power, solar power, and limit the use of coal power and produce electric cars, use high technologies in clean water and commodities. So if we have the green technology, then we will have the green productivity, and that will ensure the sustainability of the economy. So despite of our the COVID, we still be able to achieve the 7.5% of growth, and our public debt at the moment is 37% of GDP, and we have the responsibility to pay back 17%, and we focus on the infrastructure, highway system, high technology, ports, airports, and we transit to renewable energy, and we need immense finance resources. So we need the support from other countries. So we want to access from the funds from international organizations, international banks, including ODAs, so we can focus on development of our countries. Currently, we are a highly open economy, and we have the growth of 15% growth of trade. So we have to be. We are committed to sustainable and green development in our economy.
Thank you very much. You talked about the financing side, and I think one important new dimension you brought in is the argument that is the green finance, is the sustainability, is how we have a huge need for new investment in new technologies, in green technologies, in greening the global economy. And I want to move back to you, Joël, because I think that links very much to the points also you made previously. And my question to you in the second round is, what concretely do we need to change? And you talked about, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, about ODA, you talked about help from the global north, from development. There are different dimensions, right? One could be institutions, International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, development institutions. It's about restructuring debt, helping with concessional loans. It could be, there's a big discussion on the International Monetary Fund about special drawing rights, so giving countries the the means to actually make those investments. So what are your concrete proposals or demands that you say from a perspective of a global south, we would need those reforms to make that work better?
Thank you for that question. And let's start with the means to make things happen. And I want to reference some stats. SIDS need about $12 billion annually to meet their adaptation needs. This can translate into about 48 billion in economic benefits. However, of this 12 billion only represents 1.2% of all the climate finance that moves between the global north and the global south. 1.2%. That's a very discomforting number. That's not provided for us. And however, of the SIDS that are most vulnerable, 39 SIDS that are most vulnerable, we received less than 2% of the annual finance for adaptation and survival. And further, of those 39 SIDS, 10 of them received 67% of the global climate finance and adaptation finance annually. That's not right. That's problematic. It means if we have to change anything, we have to change how money moves across countries and how money moves from development agencies to countries that really need them. Until we start there, then we won't have change and we won't have survival, and we can't have 69 countries failing, economic failure, environmental failure, climate failure, while the rest of the world survives. That's not justice, that's not fair. So that's the first thing that I think we need to change. And most importantly, on the point of justice, we have to ensure that financing responds to the context, the unique needs of countries. So yes, we need to scale up finance, but sometimes we need to think about the micro scale, about how we provide financing that actually responds to the bread and butter needs of countries. We don't have the same experiences across the global south, nor do we have across the north and the south. So the financing that these international institutions offer must be context specific. Those are the two things I think need to be addressed.
Thank you very much. I want to make a bigger shift back to Mavis and to you, Pamela, and getting back to this issue of value added about trade. And both of you made this point very powerfully in your first intervention, saying we need to shift more value added production to the global south. And now, what I would love to hear from you is what are the concrete reforms that we would need? Maybe I start with you, Pamela. I mean, there's one reforms in the global south. There's a second issue that you raised, Mavis, indirectly say in Africa we need to have more regional cooperation. We know multilateralism, as I said, is not really functioning well. So is the future really building regional institutions, having regional agreements? So maybe I start with you, Pamela. What are the concrete things you would need to see more value added happening in the global south, creating new and better jobs, having more inclusion? What are the 2 or 3 things that you would say would help most?
I think there are a couple of things that I want to say. The first thing is I think we need to decide. I think our biggest problem is that we're looking at everything and nothing. And so nobody decides, you know what, we're going to look at this thing and we're going to do it. Let me give you an example. On gender, it's a $13 trillion a year market. It is controlled, procurement, government procurement. $13 trillion a year market, controlled by governments. If each government agrees that they will carve out 10 or 20% of their government procurement market specifically for women-owned businesses, it can shift, in complete terms, shift the landscape for women's economic empowerment in ways that we've never seen before. Why can't we do it? Why? There's no reason why not. And if you're talking about SDG 5, that's a very concrete decision that countries can make right there in the UN and say we're going to do it. It shifts everything. The second issue is we need to look very clearly at creating enabling structures because we have an implementation deficit. You know, I tell people all the time, in the Caribbean, we're great, and I think Africa is the same. We're great at negotiating. We are brilliant. Nothing, you know, we're off the charts. The issue is we have an implementation deficit. Why is that? Because we need enabling infrastructure, both at the policy level and at the economic level, to implement these things. So, issues of access to finance, real finance, issues of access to green energy. How do we get the technology in, and the societal framework to incentivize green transition? Because I was explaining just this morning to one of our, to our staff, Jamaica has discussed this, the Caribbean has discussed this for decades. We're sunshine every day, except maybe when a hurricane passes through, but generally, we're sunny. We have not moved to green energy in the way we could and should have because we are controlled by one multinational in most of the countries. We can't move. And until that changes, we just keep talking around the issue. That's the other thing. The third thing I will say is, how do we create a digital framework that enables the kind of connectivity that enables development? We cannot talk about development when 2.7 billion people are still offline, 18% alone in Africa. It's insane. We can't be serious. So I think we have to put those enabling strictures in place. Anyway, sorry, I think I've said enough. Thank you.
You didn't say enough. We could continue forever.
Yes,
so I think these are important points. And last but not least, Mavis, back to you. And to you, a similar question, maybe you can add on it. You brought the point up earlier on the value added in the regional dimension. So what do you see as priorities? Maybe also, you also alluded to the social dimension, and I think that's, again, a very important part you also mentioned in your first part. What are the concrete steps, the 2 or 3 priorities you would see for the Global South?
Okay, so firstly, the reason I talked about starting at the regional level in Africa is to put it in context. Look, we have 54 countries. 10 are big. 30 of those countries represent 86% of our GDP. 76% of them represent over 80% of our population. If we don't collaborate, we're not going to achieve anything. So for me, the 3 policies around regional integration, I'd like to echo the point you made, intentionality. Let's pick 3 or 4 areas that we're going to build regional value chains on. And let's be intentional about it. Being intentional about it means looking at the physical and digital infrastructure that is required for that value chain. Looking at the skills and technology and facilitate that skills and technology and mobility. And the third one might sound strange, but it's fundamental. If we are going to build these regional value chains to compete with the world, the third policy means saying no to the world when they encourage us to look out to them in that value chain, out of that regional agreement that we have made. Because not saying no is actually one of our biggest Achilles heels.
We have gone a bit over time already, I'd like to conclude here. And 30-second summary for me, this probably doesn't do justice to all the great points you have made, but I think to me it has become very clear from the discussion, from the points you have made, how important the issue of empowerment is. Empowerment for individual countries in the Global South, but also to individual groups, individuals in the Global South. You talked about different ways to get there. You talked about domestic priority setting, mobilizing people, getting them into the system, getting them into the labor market. You talked about also the global dimension, access to finance. Several of you made and said, look, a lot of it requires big investment. We need to have a global financial system that is fairer, more accessible. You talked about multinationals, big companies also have to play a role. It's not just the official, the ODA side or the official institutions, but also private institutions where we need to focus on the reforms. So to me, this is doesn't do justice to all the great points you made, but I learned a lot. I think these are important takeaways for us to continue working on this, developing these proposals. So I think it's a good agenda for the next few years. So I thank you for attending, and in particular, I'd like to thank the four of you for a great discussion, for important points. Thank you very much.
Thank you.